everybody, and welcome back to the Partner Up Podcast. I'm Sergio.
And I'm Kimberly.
And Kimberly, what's your favorite board game?
Well, technically, my board game is Monopoly, but I think the answer I'm going to give you today is Risk.
See, that is, I see you saw up my sleeve.
I did.
So today we have a topic for us that might relate to a lot of people, and it's taking some risk. And the segue looks like you saw right through it.
Yep. I just want to note we're taking a big risk by recording this episode because we do not have someone to watch the child today, and the child is not asleep on me, as people can tell. The child is next to me, awake, which is terrifying. So this is a big risk. We'll see how this episode goes.
We'll see how she fares. Usually she's just knocked out as you baby wear her.
Yep.
Not silencing your cell phone while recording is also,
it's also a big risk
huh?
that I failed at. There we go.
Well, other than America's classic board game, Kimberly, why don't you talk to us about Risk?
I think Risk is not the same for everybody. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It, like, the risks that, say, we take are different than the risks that Jeff Bezos may take. Because we have possibly more to lose on, even putting like $1,000 into something, $100 into something. People like him, he doesn't even like sweat, and it's not worth like $1,000. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So thinking of different times I've taken a risk is kind of hard when like I try to live my life without any regrets, quote unquote, because I try to live my life that way. But I think for me, a risk. So I guess I'll say this because we've talked about ourselves and our relationship on here a little bit. I think it was a risk moving up here to Austin, with you, because we weren't married when we did that.
I guess.
Even though I knew we were going to get married and like we kind of talked about it.
So it was a risk for you in particular.
Mm-hmm. Because you could have just dumped me. And the apartment we lived in was under your name, technically.
That's fair. That's very fair. For me, I saw as moving to Austin as an opportunity. There was definitely some risk. Moving to a city you don't know, with essentially no friends.
No support system.
No support
what you had back home.
Exactly. I spent most of my time just going back to see you and my family once I was already up here in Austin. But I remember I hedged that risk pretty heavily because, in my point, my point of view, I remember thinking it's like, okay, well, I need to have first and last month's rent. I need to have the deposit, and I need to have what was it? The application cost.
Yeah.
And I remember showing up to Austin with nothing but that. I had just gotten an offer letter to come work it.
And didn't you buy your car right before too? So you had like a new payment that you had never had?
It was a great payment though.
Yeah, it wasn't that bad.
It wasn't too bad, but it was definitely a brand new payment that I was going to have to take into account. So I knew I had my rent. I about calculated based on the offer letter that I got for the job to come up here to Austin, what I would need. And there was a relocation bonus. So that was nice. But all in all, I basically just scrummed up enough to get the apartment, get the car, and get over here.
Yeah.
So there was a large hedge on that risk where if everything went wrong, I would still have at least a place to live. I would still have a way to get around, and I would have a way to get a job. And if the current job I was at didn't pan out, I'd be able to move around quickly and try to make that up.
Would you say, compared to back then, I feel getting a job wasn't as risky or as like difficult, because nowadays, like, I think you've been through it. Other people who have been, not even the tech industry, since we've talked about that a lot here on this podcast, just like any type of job, like I think people are a little more picky. Like employers are a bit more like on the defensive when it comes to their employees, or really utilizing that under 90-day like probationary period, from what I've seen.
I think it's a little multiple things. Like I know for a fact that employers have not necessarily started hiring more, and that's like one of the things that's messing up the system. The second is that everybody else also got more picky with their jobs, right?
Yeah.
Not everybody wants to go into the service industry or the trades.
Yeah.
Everybody wants a cushy work from home job.
Yeah.
You know, so that not just widened or narrowed the sort of job search, but it definitely increased competition on the market. All right. And then on top of that, I mean, it was in the middle of was it a recession? I mean, what would you call the pandemic? The pandemic it was a national event, right?
It wasn't a recession because like some industries boomed and some industries went really down, you know?
There was from my perspective and what I saw during the pandemic, at least in the tech industry, there was a large stimulus package that was given to corporation businesses to stay afloat. A lot of companies used that to onboard a bunch of employees.
Yeah.
And said, look, we got this lifeline. They weren't affected yet. So that's the thing. They had this lifeline that they didn't need, but they're like, let's use it anyway. So like the government said, hey, if you guys need help during this pandemic, we have this lifeline. And most companies said, hey, we don't care if we need the help or not. We're going to take that lifeline. And then hired a bunch of people to build their products so that they can sell more. And then after the pandemic, once that lifeline was taken away and there was no more bonuses given to the businesses or no more help based on the pandemic, then, well, all that intake of personnel that no longer has any government backing to it, then they just had to shed that weight because they couldn't tolerate it. But in the meantime, they got all that production out of the people. So now you have a bunch of people that got hired and were all laid off massively back to back to back within a short period of time. And they're all looking for the job at the exact same time. So at least in the tech industry, you have a lot of people who are looking for the same job that you are, especially if it's remote. So right now, I'd say one of the biggest advantages that you can have is if you're able to go into the office. That's one of the things that would set you apart.
Yeah. That's always a question on whenever you apply for these jobs. 'Cause trust me, I've been applying and a lot of them say like, are you willing to go in? Even if it's like full-time, or even if it's hybrid.
That's right.
So you, she has something to say too, but would you say that even looking for a job right now, whether it's like breaking into this industry, I think any job, because I've heard people even say like finance or not necessarily like teaching or service industry, because I think those jobs are always like, you always kind of need those, but other industries have been kind of struggling too. It's like a risk, like even looking, like if you have one industry and you want to move over, you know, let's say you're in like government, but you want to move over to like tech, that's probably more of a risk because government jobs, unless you do something really bad, like you pretty much can stay in them for your whole entire career.
Yeah. And, you know, I mean, risk is unavoidable to a certain degree. I mean, it's the risk is part of any meaningful progress or innovation. So the goal isn't necessarily to eliminate risk, but to manage it and balance it. So you as an applicant, I mean, you're putting yourself in a pretty risky position if you just had to quit your job and go find another place.
Like we talked about a podcast or two ago, you're like, don't quit your job until you have another job.
That's right. So you balance it, right? You look for a job while you currently have a job. You know, that's the sort of balance to it. Like you're already taking a risk by switching careers, by finding another place. You don't want to compound that risk. You want to balance it. Like
that's what I had to do when I left my retail job. I went to go work for the state for a little bit. And I remember like telling you, like I wanted to just quit. And I didn't. I did not quit my retail job. I got another job. And then while I was in that job, I looked for the tech job I wanted. And that helped because even though my salary did decrease, you know, a bit while I went to work in the state, the tech job, like it went really up after that.
Yeah. And I mean, your risk was directly proportional with the reward you got. I mean,
Yeah.
you were switching from the retail industry, which is a very tough industry, but very stable. I mean, once you're in there, I mean, I don't picture Target going away anytime soon, or
Well, people are
H-E-B.
protesting them, but yeah, it's people like it's not enough to make them shut down like all of their locations. And same thing, like unless you really messed up, like if people they weren't going to fire you if you're willing to work nights and weekends, which you had to do in my position. They weren't going to fire you unless you like really did something really, really bad.
Right. So, I mean, you had a pretty stable thing and you took a risk switching into a different career.
Yeah.
I mean, unfortunately, we're living part of that risk, right?
Yeah.
Which was more unstable.
Yeah.
But I mean, it gave a pretty big reward. I mean, there was a pretty significant salary increase. There was a lifestyle change that all of a sudden you were around for the holidays.
Yeah.
You could celebrate your birthday.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a much welcome change of scenery once you switched over to the tech industry. So I would say that risk, I mean, was directly correlated to the reward you got there.
Yeah. So would you say that your biggest risk was like the one coming to Austin to get a job, or?
I would say my biggest risk was the risk of inaction. Like, what if I didn't come to Austin?
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, you have a risk where if you do something could go wrong. But I don't think enough people think about the risk of not doing something, not finishing, not following through.
Not finishing your degree, not finishing like a certain course that could like give you a certification that will help you. Not finishing even like you know, if you have like a personal goal, and what we talked about last time, the sunk cost fallacy, like you're going so far into something, but you're like, nah, I've wasted enough of my time. Like, I'm not going to do it. Like, but imagine if you just had like one more final, like big push, you could have like done it.
Right. I mean, the thing is when you're in that sort of scenario, your risk is calculated at that point. You can take measurements and indicators on, okay, now I should probably stop.
Yeah.
Right. That's what changes it from a gambler's fallacy to just taking a calculated risk.
Yeah.
Once you have that, I mean, like, let's say you go to university, you spend a couple $1,000, get into debt, right? But that usually can yield in a high paying job that would then return on that. So if we're just going based on the numbers,
Yeah.
if you go in and man, the field differs, but if you're going from like UTRGV, right, where we graduated from, then it wasn't that big of a tuition. I mean, I would say most students got out of there with like the $30,000-$40,000 in debt, and were able to get high-paying six-figure salaries right off the bat, right? So that's a heck of a return, right? But think of the people who started and then just didn't finish, right? Then their penalty, right, or their risk is actually much more because they didn't finish. They didn't stop.
And you have to start paying. I don't think they give you a 6 month, because when you graduate college, they'll give you a 6 month grace period to start paying your student loans. I don't think you get that grace period when you just quit. I knew somebody who quit. They left the state, like an out of state tuition, to like a private college, and then they quit after like 2 semesters.
It's rough.
And I was like, oof.
He's laughing over there. She just likes hearing our voices.
Yeah.
Look at that. Ah, you guys can't see it, but we can see it. It's great.
It
Laughing baby.
Yes. So I think those people take risks. So that's why I think like a decision like college, a decision about a trade school, about something you're going to have to invest money in to afford. I mean, nowadays, like I've heard that I think some Ivy Leagues or some really big time colleges are starting to, if your family makes under like $200K and you have like certain grades, like you can go get like a full ride, or at least like most of your tuition covered. So,
but what about the people that don't choose the college route, right? I mean, I chose the college route and I went through it because I was a adept at technology, right? So I know that my barrier to entry was going to be a degree. That, and I have other people in my family who can attest to that, right? And my dad constantly told me how there's two sort of options. You can go to college and get right in the door, or you can use years of experience to back up the lack of certification. And I remember at the time the movie Monsters Inc. Came out.
Yeah.
I was still in college when that movie came out.
Yeah, I think we were both still in college.
We were like exiting college. Like maybe we were like towards our senior years already. I'm not sure. But anyway, that's the story of Sully.
We were just starting college. It came out in 2013.
Okay. So we were starting college, and at that point, I had a lot of tech skills already, right? And the first thing, somebody with tech skills going into engineering school, you hear the story of Steve Jobs, and you think, well, they left school, maybe I should too. So like, I talked to my dad, and I'm like, why don't we just start a business, blah, blah, blah. You know me. So he's like, no. He sat me down, and was like, look, you can either take the college route and at least have a key. So when you get to the lock, you can unlock that door. Right. Mm-hmm. But the difference is experience. If you have enough experience, you're going to go through.
Yeah. Because I know I've even heard people like younger people that I know, I've heard like, why did I even go to college? Why did I do this? You can get paid more even for just having a degree because like you're worth more to an employer.
No. You want to know why? It comes back to our topic, risk. Right? You are less risky of a hire if you have a degree.
Yeah.
Because somebody else put you through a regiment and you finished it. So therefore, you're letting the company who's hiring you know this person has met at least these qualifications. So they're not as risky of a hire as somebody who doesn't have these qualifications.
Yeah.
If they don't have these qualifications, we have to take them at their word that their previous jobs hopefully trained them to do this thing.
Yeah.
So that's why. They're not paying you more because you have a degree. They're paying you more because you're less of a risk. They're buying security when they hire you.
Yeah.
But let me go back to and finish the analogy or the metaphor my dad was showing me with the Monsters U University. They had that up, like that's Monsters U is literally that the analogy like in a movie. He always told me that. And when we went to go see it, he's like, look, they went to college and, you know, things happen in the movie where they don't go through the degree plan, right? So instead, they decide to go just work in the factory towards the end of the movie, right? Mm-hmm. So that's when they join the factory instead of going down the monster route. And sorry if I spoiled the movie, okay?
It's over 10 years old?
Yeah, so it's fair game at this point. But then you, at the towards the end of the movie, as the credits roll, you see them like climbing the ladder to be scarers, which is what they wanted to be, right? Yeah. But if you would have graduated college, you go straight into being a scarer once you graduate, or you could get there through climbing the corporate ladder at the scare factory. Mm-hmm. So my dad was like, look, which one do you want to be? Do you want to spend 4 years and then jump straight in? Or do you want to spend 10 years building up enough experience to where people now put you in that position? And I was like, well, when you put it that way, it's a matter of time, saving time.
And besides like careers, you know, going to school, like personal risks, you know, like those two can have a big factor on your life because, you know, if you make personal choices like where you want to live, who you want to be with, that can affect your career, your you know, your schooling, education. Like what if, I don't know, this person, I think the person that you end up marrying is like the biggest risk you could take. More than anything. True. This is like the most important decision you're going to make.
I agree.
Make or break your life. Well, thanks.
No, but it is true. I mean, depending on personalities and goals that you each might have, if you partner up with the wrong person, then you're going to be, I mean, sometimes being held back, working against your partner.
Yeah.
I mean, you want to make sure the person that you're with is going to help you reach your goals and help you be successful in any aspect. You know, for me, it's very business driven, very metric, right? I have a very clear picture and clear goal of what I want.
Yeah.
I've discussed that with you and you agree. I mean, you're probably not as crazy as me when it comes to goal setting, but you help me. You support me to get there, and I support you likewise.
Yeah, I think it's important too because if you don't have the right person, even, you know, your daily life, you know, I want to have a family. I want to, I don't know, be a marathon runner. Like, you have to have the support, and it can be risky, like being with somebody without having those conversations. So that's why I think, talking to your partner, even if the conversations are uncomfortable, I think it's even more of a risk to not have those conversations before you get married or move in together, or even just like commit longer than like a year, or two to somebody.
I remember my parents being very traditional parents. You and I moved in together before we got married, and that's controversial.
It is very controversial.
But in my mind, I didn't want to take that risk and of like marrying someone without knowing who they were really.
Yeah, because living together, sorry, Bella, I totally kicked her. Living together is a great test, and religious beliefs aside, like, you have to know people. The people I've talked to, they've always said like the first year of marriage is always the hardest for a lot of people because they're getting to know each other. When you don't live with somebody, you don't know them. You don't know. Do they leave their dirty socks next to the hamper, or do they put them in the hamper?
I don't even think that's the dirty socks placement is important. Does your partner get upset at you if you leave those dirty socks by the hamper instead of in the hamper?
Yeah.
See, these little interactions
And like
are important.
how you guys connect too, because like saying goodnight at the end of the night and like going your separate ways is much different. Like, do I expect like a quiet bedroom, like nighttime routine, or do I stay up all night with this person,
Mm-hmm. So my parents were already pretty like apprehensive of like us living together, and we were in a 1-bedroom apartment there up in close to Cedar Park. But they're like, all right, whatever. But at this point, it was already been maybe
moving together.
It was a year that I had been living by myself, and then a second year that I had been living with you, and then the pandemic hit, and
we had been together. I think because we were together for like 3 years before we moved in together.
Right.
It was like 4. We've been together for like 4 years at this point.
Right. So I remember specifically the pandemic started hitting, and then everybody started panicking. And when you panic, let me reset a little bit here. Pandemic hit. Everybody was panicking. The market started tanking. Real estate started tanking. And people weren't buying houses because where there's risk, there's interest rate. So interest rates were getting really high.
Yeah.
But then the government was like, hey, let's give you guys a little bit of a boost here. So then they were sponsoring much better loans with interest rates. And I saw the opportunity. I'm like, okay, I've been living here. I can probably I actually can afford to get a house now, because at that point I had just gotten promoted to another job. So I had accepted an offer letter that came with a promotion. Yeah. So I was like, okay, perfect. Now is the time to get a new, like, to actually make the jump and invest in a house for me. Like, that wasn't even taken into consideration you at the time. Like, for me personally, I thought this was great. Like, even if I was still single and living in Austin, now is the time to invest in a house. So I went and then did the whole process, and I told my parents, I'm like, I'm going to buy a house. And they're like, wait, so you're going to buy a house and you're going to move in with this girl? And I go, yeah. It's like, don't you think that's a big commitment to make before getting married? And I go, you guys think that getting married is not a bigger commitment than a house? Like, yeah. For me, I was like, it just like not taking this time to really get to know each other and knowing whether or not we were compatible would have been much better to do it this way than to just like blindly just take the plunge and not know. I mean, we would have been fine. Yeah. Right? If we would have just done it and then taken the blind plunge, the leap of faith. But the thing is, there are some people out there who aren't.
Or they're pressured into it.
Yeah, and I didn't want to take that chance.
We didn't listen to our parents' peer pressure. Because, yeah, and my parents are very traditional too. But, we waited, and maybe this is not a good message some people don't like to hear, but we got to have like the weddings plural, of our dreams, and also the honeymoon of our dreams, 2.5 weeks in Europe. So, I mean, no regrets. No regrets, even though it was a quote unquote risk. Our parents, I bet you, were like, oh my gosh, they're going to live together before they get married, and they're buying a house. And the house is, just under your name. So technically it's more risky for me, because if we would have broken up, I would have had no say to this house, even though I was paying for half of the mortgage and I was taking care of this house, setting it up to be our home. And it was more of a risk for me than it was for you. And I think sometimes, like, when you have partners, whether, whoever you are with, you take those risks, and there's always in a lot of the instances, there is somebody who's taking more of a risk than somebody else, So always think these things through. Like, don't just blindly agree to these type of things. Always say, hey, like, what's in this for me? And don't think that's selfish. I think that's just smart, because, like, yes, you should love people selflessly, right? I hope I said that right. But you also have to protect yourself. And I think I was protecting myself, because at this point, like I said, we've been together for 4 years. I knew we were going to get married because we got engaged like a year later.
Yeah.
So, like, and I kind of knew.
In the house,
yeah. So I think you have to, like, kind of weigh those things. If you have a partner who you don't see yourself marrying, who you don't want, to have children with, if that's what you want, and you say move in with them and into a house that they bought on their own, like, that's a risk.
I mean, yeah, and, like, to be fair, I remember looking at my parents and saying, look, I'm pretty sure I'm gonna marry her, but I want to know first. Like, I wouldn't be doing this with just anybody.
Yeah.
Like, I'm doing this because she's in the final stages of candidacy.
Thanks.
Yeah,
And people probably hear you say that, and they're probably like, "Oh my gosh!" But it is true. It's a test for both of you, both parties. Yeah.
The way I like to think of it is data mitigates risk.
Yeah.
Right. The more informed your decision, the lower the true risk.
Yeah.
You gather the data that you need, but you don't get stuck in analysis paralysis. Like, oh my God, dude, is she the right one? Is she not? Is he the right one? Is he not? No, just analyze the situation.
Yeah, living together in a year in a house was the good like final leg of the test, I think, for both of us.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I think after that, any risk that we took was well worth the reward.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us here at the Partner Up Podcast, episode
12.
Episode 12, everybody. Thank you for coming. Hope we see you next time. I'm Sergio.
And I'm Kimberly.
Bye.
Bye.